Some of the medical professionals are thinking we might be in this situation for another 2 or 3 years. And so I think it might be time for us to just start thinking about not COVID as a state of emergency, but as sort of the state of things for us.
That's Seattle City Council member Tammy Morales talking about a long road ahead when it comes to our response to the COVID crisis. The council wrestling with this issue, we all are, as the Delta variant brings with it new frustrations and new guidelines from the state and local health officials. We're going to talk about the COVID crisis. We're going to talk about affordable housing, police budgets, and a whole lot more in this episode of Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. Brian Callanan here with you. I'm a host on Seattle Channel. The views expressed here are my own. I'm taking the show international this week. I'm actually joining up with my co-host, Kevin Schofield of Seattle City Council Insight this week from Switzerland. And Kevin, you know I like to stay neutral on my politics. Maybe I didn't need to go to Switzerland to prove that point. What do you think?
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not in Switzerland. It's just it's just you, Brian. Right?
I know.
You're taking half the show there. Some of us are still working it back at home.
I'm sorry. I'm working as a grip on a travel show called Real Electric Adventures. If you want to check it out on PBS next year, please do. It's going to be really fun. A big thanks to City Grind Espresso, our background noise sponsor for the audio podcast. They're planning to be back open at City Hall on October 4th. Mark your calendars there. Please support them and other small businesses. Thanks also to our patrons. Karen joined us a few weeks ago, and a Seattle News, Views, and Brews mug is headed her way. We're definitely going to get that to her. We thank her for her patronage there. And we will also make sure we get a mug shot from here. I'm going to steal the spotlight, though, this week. The mug shot I'm bringing you from the highest spot in Europe where you can get to with public transit there. I'm talking about Jungfraujoch in the Swiss Alps. I was up 11,361 feet. Kevin, I'm taking this show to new heights. That's what I'm talking about.
You are, man.
I'm trying to make this work. Well, thank you, Kevin, for joining me as always. A big thanks also to Converge Media. Converge airing the video version of the podcast on their YouTube channel Wednesday nights at 7. Let's get started with right here, right now. All right, the Seattle City Council is very busy this week. Just before we get the mayor's budget proposal for the fall, we've got ordinances, resolutions flying right and left, including one to rename Thomas Street between 1st and 2nd Avenues, Lenny Wilkins Way. I'm all about that one. Bring back the Sonics. That was really cool to see. But Kevin, I want to focus on an affordable housing ordinance that's getting a public hearing this week, number 120157, if you're keeping score at home. So this would modify the income threshold for developments that get those bonuses for additional density, more units from the city. The way the law stands right now, there's a requirement that for property owned by religious organizations, these properties have to serve households with an average income of 60% of the average median income. What the council is considering this week is moving that threshold up to 80%. I want to talk about this. What do you think the council is trying to accomplish here?
Well, so, I mean, let's just sort of recall the history of this.
Please.
The start of the court case where the court said that that the government is very limited in its ability to restrict religious organizations from using their own property for affordable housing, so long as doing so is part of that religious organization's mission. Earlier this year, the state legislature, Washington State Legislature, modified a bunch of rules to sort of come into compliance with that court ruling. They made some changes to law, and now this has trickled down. And at the beginning of the summer, the city of Seattle actually updated their laws related to zoning for property owned by religious organizations.
Right.
And when they wrote this, they said, to the point you mentioned before, that it was basically reducing the restrictions on the size and massing of affordable housing that could be built on property owned by religious organizations.
Yeah.
But it had to be for affordable housing. And the definition they put in that said that the average rental price had to be affordable for somebody making 60% of annual median income, right? And for a lot of these kinds of programs and restrictions, we're going to talk about another one in a little minute with the same sort of thing. Right. There's a lot of question about should it be 30%? Should it be 60%? Should it be 80%? Right? And the default for a lot of them is 80% for the median income. Councilmember Peterson, who has a background working for HUD in the federal agency that looks at housing, has pretty consistently pushed hard to change those to 60%. And he did, in fact, for this one, change it to 60%. So we're trying to make more housing available for really kind of the lower income people in our community.
Sure.
That, let's just be honest, the market, the private market for housing just is never going to address.
Right.
It's never really going to be cost effective for them to build the
Right.
housing for 30% or 60%. So
Yeah.
he's always trying to get more of these programs to address that.
Right.
And the council made that change. But
Yeah.
now they've heard back from a lot of these religious organizations who are coming back and saying, you know, given the
minute,
pricing
yeah.
for construction right now and for
Yeah.
property and all this, that, you know, 60% just doesn't pencil out for a lot of these projects.
Yeah.
Right? Some of which it actually sort of had already in the pipeline.
Right.
So the council is now coming back and they're considering changing it to 80%. So
Right.
that these projects will pencil out for these religious organizations.
Right. Just to check on this, where's the pushback going to come when we have this public hearing here this week? Is it going to be from these people who are saying we need more of this 30% average median income?
Yeah, you know, I don't know.
Is that what we're gonna hear?
I'm not sure there's going to be any significant pushback.
Yeah.
If it would, yeah, it would probably from that saying, look, you know, they're at 80%, you know, median income. You know, you're talking about what they call kind of naturally affordable housing. In a lot of
Yes,
cases,
right.
We're kind of the older existing housing is going to be, you know, it's going to cover some of that, right? But the real need is at 60% and 30%, because again, the market's just never really going to address that effectively.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But for the same reasons,
Yeah.
these religious organizations are saying, yeah, it doesn't really pencil out for us either, though.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess, what does it mean for the future of housing in Seattle? Is there a bigger picture piece to this, Kevin?
Well, the bigger picture for Seattle is that, you know, if we're going to solve our housing crisis,
yes,
right, and we still have an affordable housing crisis,
of course,
in the city, and the census data we'll talk about in a little while shows that very clearly as well. We need to be building housing at every price point.
Yeah.
Right. We can't just build luxury housing.
Right.
We can't just build affordable housing. Right?
Of course. Yeah.
We have to be making investments across the whole spectrum. Right. So there's no one thing that's going to solve housing.
Yeah.
For us,
yeah.
Right? We have to do a bunch of different things. And this is a piece of the puzzle. And it's important to get right, but it's also important to realize that this isn't the only thing that we have to do.
Yeah, and important to get these different religious organizations on board and involved too. I want to talk about another housing issue, specifically a finance and housing issue. If you want to talk about the committee here, the council is also considering a renewal of the multifamily housing property tax exemption program, commonly called the MFTE here. And there's a little bit of a twist here. I want to get into this. So the MFTE gives an exemption to owners who do income and rent restrictions on 20 to 25% of the units in newly constructed buildings. So right now, those exemptions expire after 12 years. The council this week wants to increase that to 20. I wanted to talk about this. What's the council trying to do here, Kevin?
Well, again, this comes back to some changes in state law. So
yeah,
this year in Seattle, there are apparently about 350 units that were created and have been, deemed kept at affordable rates through this multifamily tax exemption program, right? Where the landlords get a tax exemption in return for this guarantee that they will keep this certain number of units affordable.
Right.
This year, again, early at the beginning of this year, the state legislature changed the rules around the MFTE program because it's a state authorized program that allowed expiring units to be extended for up to another 12 years.
Right.
And so this is a chance for the city council to go update their rules to make sure that they're taking advantage of these changes in state laws, and so that they can keep these 350 units from expiring.
Yeah.
Right? But then sort of the rules really come down to under what conditions that's all true. So now this is a case where they're going to try to do the opposite of what is happening with the religious organizations, right? Where the rules up to now for MFTE have said 80% AMI.
Yes.
And now with the extension, the city council is trying to lower that to 60%.
Yeah.
Right. But there are issues about sort of grandfathering in. So does that happen, with existing tenants,
right?
Or does it happen with when an existing tenant leaves one of these units and it rolls over to a new tenant? So there's a bunch of complications, and there's also a complication around what happens with somebody who's in one of these units that does in fact expire,
Yeah.
And there's no guarantee that all 350 of these units will in fact get extended by the landlords. The landlords could just let them expire.
Right.
So there's a provision in this ordinance that they're looking at, which would require those landlords to pay 1 month of relocation, 1 month rent worth of relocation assistance for any unit where there is a tenant in it right now, and the MFTE price is expiring.
Yeah, and I just thought it was a very interesting point here, because the council is looking at a companion resolution, I think, to this bill when we talk about the MFTE, and they're saying, we want to study this. Is this program working? Basically, the bottom line that I saw in this resolution, Kevin, was that they're asking the Office of Housing, the council is asking the Office of Housing to study if it would be more effective for the city to simply buy down rents itself rather than approving an extension of this tax credit. I thought that was really interesting. I think the council really wants to study this and see how effective the MFTE really is.
Right. Whether a tax exemption is the right way to go on this, particularly when it gets into these issues of how long is sort of the guarantee for.
Yes.
And, and these guarantees, part of it is just administratively, it's really difficult to enforce, right? Yeah, how does the city keep track of all of the commitments for these and other kinds of programs that they're doing? MHA programs, where there's making, commitments for, units that are built out to be kept affordable, right? It's just the administrative overhead of doing this. And so are there simpler ways to do this? Yeah. Right. Then trying to manage it through these complex programs of giving you a tax exemption.
Yeah, right.
Or more you can build your building larger, add another floor to it, but then you have to make these ongoing guarantees about keeping prices affordable.
Right. Wow, so many pieces to that puzzle. Thank you for breaking that down. All right, up next, we're going to talk about the Seattle Police Department budget, what to do with those $15 million left over now that nearly 300 officers have left the SPD over the past year and a half. That's a head-on. Now hear this. So here we go once again. The Seattle Police Department budget in the spotlight, a $15 million surplus following the departure of hundreds of officers over the past 18 months. The council has now divvied up that money. They worked on this last week, but not without a little bit of a battle. Councilmember Alex Peterson proposed a few ideas to take back some of the money the council was talking about putting into community-based public safety alternatives and instead pay for hiring bonuses for police officers. An interesting response to that from Councilmember Lisa Herbold, the public safety chair. She points out a number of departments in the city have lost personnel as well. Should they be getting a hiring bonus paid too? Well, here's what she said about that.
I value the delivery of city services of all city departments. And if we need to just discuss recruitment, I think we need to consider vacancies across all city departments and whether we need to consider hiring bonuses to fulfill hiring goals and service delivery obligations for other departments as well.
So, Kevin, the council voted down 2 attempts at putting more money into hiring bonuses. A $3 million version only got 2 yes votes from Council Member Peterson and Juarez. A $1.1 million version nearly made it out of committee, but it only had 4 votes, Strauss and Lewis joining Peterson and Juarez there. What do you make of what the council decided here when it came to the police department budget and this $15 million in surplus cash?
Yeah, the devil's really in the details here. So the council has been, just in general, even beyond this, trying to do 2 things. They're trying to follow through on the commitment to over time downsize the police department, but at the same time grow alternatives as community-based programs, right? So they got this $15 million salary savings. They had earmarked about $3 million of additional money to go into community-based programs, right? So Peterson's first try at this, the $3 million, he said, no, let's claw that back. Rather than move that out of these $15 million of salary savings and give it to community-based organizations, let's keep that within SPD and allow them to use it for maybe hiring bonuses, maybe retention bonuses, but hiring and retention programs, right? Yeah. And the other council member said, no, we really think it's important that we maintain our commitment to grow. And it's not like there's some who frame that as we're taking money away from community-based organizations. No, it's not, because the money was never over there, right? Right. But they're trying to do both of these things at the same time and strike the right balance. His second version, which was $1.1 million, was not taking money from anything else. There was $1.1 million that was left over of the $15 million that hadn't been allocated. And he said, let's put that into, and that almost passed. That failed by a 4-5 vote. So it almost sort of sneaked through there. But again, the bigger picture here is They're trying to figure out what was the best thing to do with this $15 million of salary savings.
Yeah.
SPD is going to get to keep about 10 million of it. And they're going to
Yeah.
use it for, a bunch of other things that would mitigate the high attrition that you mentioned earlier, a little bit for overtime for events because the economy is picking up again faster than we thought. And that wasn't in the budget. Some technology projects, like a really, really long overdue scheduling system, because SPD tracks, they track their work schedules on paper still.
Yeah.
They do timekeeping on paper. It's just crazy, right?
Unlike any other department. Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah. Right. So there's all that. 500K is going to go towards the Garfield Superblock program, which is, that's a great project that's going on. About 2 million for a whole set of other uses. Now, I mean, the flip side of this is Councilmember Swant also pushed forward an amendment to try to get more money moved out of this, this $15 million pot into community-based programs.
Right.
And that also failed, right? So we saw both sides of it in this session. They tried to move more of this out of SPD. That didn't work. They tried to move less of it out of SPD, and that didn't work either. So it's the city council trying to find, like, what's the sweet spot in the middle that balances all the different needs that we have.
Yeah, tell me about what your take was on the SPD's response to this, because they didn't get exactly what they were after here. I know the mayor was talking about this, Councilmember Peterson was talking about this, Chief Diaz was talking about this too. And of course, they've been talking a lot about this surge in gun violence we've seen in Seattle over this summer here. The SPD's response to this, how did you look at that?
Well, SPD's response after this passed was pretty much just, thank you for approving the money that the other uses for this money. They've been picking a lot of fights this year, and the city council's been picking a lot of fights with SPD. And I certainly think, from what I can tell, SPD is tired of picking fights with the council over stuff, right? So, like, you got most of what we want. Good, we're out of here. We're gonna Chief Diaz has been saying from the beginning of the year, the most important thing for him is just predictability and stability in his budget. He begged the council to stop taking money away from them, just so he knew what he had to spend. He's like, look, there are a bunch of things I could do to mitigate the effects of this attrition. But they cost money, right? And if you keep taking money away from me and I don't know what I'm going to have at the end of the year, then I don't know whether I can invest in these things, right? So just give me some predictability so I can make a plan.
And we'll have to see what happens in the weeks ahead as the budget process starts up, because I know Councilmember Herbold was saying, let's talk about that in the budget process ahead. So there's a lot still coming up here when it comes to the SPD budget, et cetera, in the next couple of weeks. I wanted to take another turn here, Kevin, and if I could, a deeper dive on a great piece you did in SCC Insight about the 2020 census and its effect on the housing market in Seattle. One very important thing off the top, this was a big surprise to me. For all of the concerns we have in the city over housing, Seattle has been building a lot of housing over the past decade. Your thoughts about that?
So the city as a whole between 2010 and 2020 grew 21.1%, and our housing stock grew 19.4%. So we almost kept pace.
Pretty close.
And Everett actually built more housing than their population. Vancouver, Washington, which is largely a suburb of Portland, was basically on par. They managed to sort of keep pace too. But, like, you look at cities like Spokane and Bellevue and a lot of other cities around the state, and it matches what happens in a lot of cities around the country, which is not even close. They did not get even close. And, historically, this is a problem. This is how a lot of cities have gotten in these kinds of housing crises, where they just didn't invest in continuing to build housing. And and I mean, just to be clear, Seattle wasn't consistent across all 10 years and building housing every year. A lot of it kind of was, in the second half, right? But a lot of housing has been built in the last, particularly in the last 5 years, and it, and it makes a real difference. We have to sort of continue to delve into the details of, like, well, was it, as we were talking about earlier, across all the different price points? Or was it a lot of,
and was it in different districts of the city too? I know that was something you uncovered in your research.
And it's not across the whole city. So, we have this comprehensive plan. We have this whole, grand bargain that was built around urban village strategies and really said, here are the places we're going to change the zoning to allow more housing to be built, right? And you actually see in the figures that largely what happened with building housing was what we planned on happening, right? There's a ton of it. Over half of the new housing that was built was in District 3 and District 7 in the center of the city.
Yes,
right? And as you go farther north and farther south, particularly in the very north end and the very south end of the city, there was a lot less housing built, right? So our plans are really determining where the housing is built. And as we come up in a few years, in 2024, we have another major update to the comprehensive plan that's scheduled. We have to do it every certain number of years. And there's going to be a lot of folks looking at, this whole urban village strategy and where we said we're building housing. Is that helping or is it hurting?
Right.
So there's going to be a lot of big questions that are asked around that.
And I wanted to ask about this specifically, Kevin. You're putting together a series of articles about some different things to be gleaned from the 2020 census. And I wonder if you could give us a bit of a sneak peek ahead, because you're talking about some of the impacts of gentrification, which are difficult to really nail down. I know I think it's tough to do that, just try to work out that data there and tell people what it means. But looking at gentrification, the different cultural issues, the different economic issues here, can you tell me where you're going with this research here? Because I think there's a lot still ahead to be learned.
Yeah, I think in particular, when you look at the Black community in Seattle, the numbers for District 2 and District 3, very different things happened to the population of the Black community and housing across those that make for a very complicated picture for gentrification that we're going to have to, it's taken me a while to kind of tease this apart. In District 2, the size of the Black community in 2010 versus 2020 is almost exactly the same. But in District 3, the Black community, the size of it has decreased significantly in those 10 years. But at the same time, when you look at those were two districts, the only two districts in the city where housing growth actually outpaced population growth. Right. So we actually grew housing in both those. We grew it pretty significantly in District 3. Right. So there's more housing there. It grew faster than the general population did. And yet the Black community shrank significantly. So what happened there compared to District 2, where housing also grew at the very least at pace with, if not a little faster than population, and we managed to sustain the Black community there. Obviously, pricing is a part of that.
Of course.
Housing prices in District 3 and Capitol Hill versus the south end of the city are really different. They went up in both places a lot, but they're very different price points. So we have to consider that, but we have to consider a lot of other factors as well that fit into that. So that's the kind of things that we're going to be looking at as we figure out what really happened over the last 10 years.
Thank you for that series of articles, Kevin. It's great. Make sure you check it out on SCC Insight, folks. I know we're going to be talking about this in the weeks and months ahead here. All right, we're going to look ahead towards COVID, hazard pay for grocery workers, and you. It's all coming up on What's Next. Kevin, I wanted to follow up on something the council was working on last week. They're all set to end the $4 per hour hazard pay for grocery workers. They've been talking about it for a while. And then they said, hold up, we got the Delta variant going on here. This isn't the right time. What do you make of what the council did? Because it looks like this $4 an hour pay bump for grocery workers is going to be around indefinitely at this point.
Well, I think COVID's going to be around indefinitely. At the from what things look at right now, and clearly we're seeing the Delta variant surge everywhere right now, and the numbers are up everywhere. Obviously, they're up a lot more on hospitalizations, and deaths are up a lot more for people who are unvaccinated. So, plug for go get vaccinated if you're not already, because it really makes a huge difference in outcomes. But they're looking at the numbers and they're saying, we should be thinking in public places as we're putting mask mandates and vaccination mandates in place. It's like, look, we're trying to keep our public places safe, and that's important for grocery workers and other people that are really still on the front line of this, right? And so from that point of view, while back in July, Councilmember Mosqueda was saying, things are looking pretty good. It looks like we could lift.
A lot of people were thinking that.
We're saying it's hard to see where the end exactly is right now. Hopefully there is an end, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's hard to see where it is. Now, the weird part about this is that in the middle of the summer, when Mosqueda was pushing forward, and they passed out of committee this bill that would end the hazard pay mandate. One of the lawsuits that was challenging it in court, actually sort of at the appeals level, got dropped. They voluntarily dismissed it because it looked like it was going to be moot because this thing was going to go away.
Right.
And now, when it came up for final vote, the city council changed their mind and said, no, we're going to keep this around.
Wow.
Right. So I've been trying to get a hold of the lawyers who filed that challenge. They're not answering right now. My guess is they're pretty sore about the fact that, given sort of what looked like assurances from the city that this thing was going to go away, they said, okay, we'll drop the lawsuit.
Right.
And now it's not going away. They changed their mind. Is that a kind of a bait and a switch that the city government did there?
I don't know. I'm going to be interested to see how that court case plays out. And just this bigger question, Kevin, of how the city and maybe other cities too respond to the COVID pandemic. Do we stay in emergency mode? I mean, I heard Councilmember Morales talking about that. We had that at the top of the show here. Is there a different approach that we need to take to COVID, and what does that look like? I think, again, COVID, the response to it, we're building the plane at 30,000 feet in the air, whatever else. But do you have an idea of, is there a different way for local governments to respond to this crisis that isn't emergency mode?
Wow.
Stumper.
That's hard to say.
Yeah.
I think part of it is what you might call a back to basics movement, right? I mean, look, we did pretty well in a number of the phases of this thing, right? Where everybody was wearing masks, we were social distancing, we were doing all the right things. We managed to keep it largely under control, right?
City of Seattle did a really good job with that. Yes.
And vaccinations combined with that will make an enormous difference.
Right.
The problem is right now we're trying to open up the economy again. And we're getting lax about a bunch of those things. Right. People are back to wearing masks again, which is great. But we were not socially distancing, right? And we were not wearing masks indoors, and that really hurt the numbers in a lot of ways, right? So I don't think anybody wants to go back to shutting down the economy. No, right? We saw how bad that was, right? Absolutely. That has terrible effects as well, right? But the number of people dying from COVID is higher now, right? And I think we all expect our government to figure out a way to address that, right? So how do we have the best of both worlds? How do we not shut down the government and yet still stay healthy, keep this pandemic under control, keep our hospitals from overflowing? It's a very, very difficult balance.
That is the challenge ahead. So deep breath on COVID. I want to talk about that later, I know, but I want to try to move on as we can to the latter part of our show, which is always a great one for me. We talk about the taste of something sweet you can have on your coffee break here. Kevin is a vast source of knowledge, and I'm going to try to test him today on something that I consumed recently in the town of Merton. This is in the western part of Switzerland, mainly German speaking here. Kevin, I had something called Niedelkuchen, which was a sour cream cake. So get that through your head, a really creamy, awesome sour cream cake. And then on top of it, kind of like a honey sweet topping here. I bit into this thing saying, what? It was probably one of the best things I've ever tasted. And I wanted to talk to you about that sour cream cake thing, because I thought I was going to get something sweet, but that wasn't where the sweet was. It was in the topping there. And I don't know. Have you ever heard of a dish like that? It was so tasty. It was delicious.
This is sort of a philosophy that goes through a lot of different cooking and baking. It's like, how do you match flavors, right?
Yes.
How do you make something that's not too sweet? Or not too sour or bitter, but mix those flavors in a way that they really complement each other, right? I mean, look at sourdough bread.
Yeah, right. Sure.
Right? Look at sourdough bread, right? Think about even just cocktails, right?
Yeah.
What do you mix in a cocktail?
Now we're getting just
a really interesting mix. So baked goods are no different. Right?
Yeah.
How do you find the right the right flavor for sort of the bread, the pastry part of it?
Yes.
In flavors, and there's around pastry. There's a lot of philosophy that says that really kind of want the pastry itself, the bread part of it, to be pretty bland, right?
Yeah. Right.
But it's really sort of it's a container for other flavors that you want to give people.
So true.
But it's all about the mix.
I wish I could bring back a piece of this to you, Kevin, but I have eaten my weight in Niedelkuchen and fondue for the past couple of weeks here. So yeah, sorry. I'll see what I can do, man. I need to get back at stateside here, and hopefully we can figure this out.
We got some great fundy places here in Seattle too.
Oh, don't even.
I don't know about Nidokoken, but you know.
I don't want to see cheese for at least another month, but I thank you, sir. Thank you, Kevin, as always here. Thank you again to our patrons and everyone who is listening out there. It's Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. Please subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen. Again, please do become a patron on Patreon if you like what you're hearing. We really could use your support. Thanks also for watching on Converge Media too. And it's the international show. It's been a blast. Kevin, thanks for making this work. We will see everybody soon. All right, bye.
Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2021.